CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. The death toll from the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria hits more than 11,000, with the United Nations warning that figure could reach 20,000.
The international community mobilises search and rescue teams from around the world, but time is now running out to try to save the victims.
And a plea to British lawmakers from Ukraine's President Zelensky: send fighter jets.
Combat aircrafts for Ukraine. Wings for freedom.
The death toll from the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria has reached more than 11,000, with the United Nations warning it could hit 20,000.
Criticism is growing over the official response to the disaster. Turkey's President Erdogan acknowledged there had been delays, but said the situation was under control.
Search and rescue teams say that time is running out. CGTN's Siobhan McCall reports.
A glimmer of hope amid the devastation. A family of 6 pulled alive from the rubble in Syria. A baby rescued after being trapped for 36 hours in Turkey. A Syrian boy saved from a collapsed building. But rescuers are warning that time is running out to find more survivors in southern Turkey and northern Syria. Temperatures are bitter and thousands are at risk of freezing to death.
Our home is gone. We got caught in the rain. We sleep on wet ground. We don't even have a hot tea to drink. Look at our situation. May God help us.
Bodies are piling up in this sports hall close to the Turkish epicenter of the earthquake. Buildings have been flattened, and anger and frustration is growing at what many say is the slow response of the authorities.
We will never allow our citizens to be left out on the streets. I am asking our people not to give the provocateurs an opportunity and only pay attention to the statements coming from the Disaster Management Authority.
Getting aid into Syria is particularly challenging because of ruined roads and infrastructure crumbling after years of civil war. Aleppo is one of the worst hit areas. Yusuf's family are trapped under the rubble.
I've been waiting for news of my father, my mother, my brother, my sister and her son. Nothing is known about them so far. I talked to them and heard their voice, but unfortunately, as you can see here, they're very slow at work and they don't have enough equipment.
The World Health Organization says the death toll won't be known for some time, but it's estimated some 23 million people will be affected by the earthquakes. International rescue teams are joining the frantic search for survivors as the clock runs down on what is known as the golden period for saving lives, 72 hours after a disaster. Siobhan McCall, CGTN.
Well, we have correspondents across the earthquake zone. In a moment, Trent Murray, who's in Malatya in the southeast of Turkey. But first, our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas in Adana, where many international aid teams have been arriving. Evangelo, the rescue operation continues. What are you seeing?
Yeah, we're currently on the site of one of those rescue operations in a building behind me. As you can see, has been completely flattened from the earthquake. We don't have the number of how many people have died, but we do know that at least 16 people are currently trapped under the debris. The operation has been going on for quite some time now. Trucks are coming to picking up the debris with the hope of perhaps helping and finding people under there. They're using their hands, buckets, shovels, cranes, whatever they have, and even sometimes they just all remain silent so they can just listen to perhaps any voices that they can hear underneath that rubble. Now, we know that a lot of the buildings in the area have been evacuated. A lot of the people have been taken to safety because the buildings here are not safe to be for people to live in. We're currently in the northern part of Adana. This is the area that has been affected mostly in the city of Adana. And the situation now, as we speak, there are about 3 to 4 different areas here in the northern part that their rescue operations are undergoing. Now, there is the previous place that we were noted that more than 90 people lost their lives in a single building that collapsed. We have a note that here in the Adana, about 250 people in total have lost their life, and 10,000 people are hospitalized.
International aid has been arriving where you are. How important is it to try to bring some kind of solace to that situation there? I'm terribly sorry. I think we've lost the line to Evangelo Sipsas. Understandably, there are lots of communication problems, but we'll try and return to him a little later in the programme. Meantime, we'll move on with the rest of today's news.
Several countries have dispatched search and rescue teams to the earthquake zone, including a team from China. They've arrived in the Turkish city of Adana, carrying 20 tons of specialised tools and medical equipment, and 4 rescue dogs. Our correspondent Senyu Yuan reports.
Showing you the sign here, so you can see there is a sign saying UNRDC. This is the research and dispatch. I think this is the receive and departure coordination center, as I talked to the official who have been talking to locals in terms of rescue missions. So when the rescue team, search and rescue team come here to check in, they will come here to report and get the stamps. So we just finished getting our visa approval, and more team members are actually behind me, and we are, after finishing here, we will be getting on the airplane again to get our stuff, and then we will be leaving airport. And so this is where we need to check in as China search and rescue team.
I'm going to try and take you back now to our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas in Adana in Turkey. You can see the aftermath of the collapse of the building there. Evangelo, let me ask you about the international aid that has been arriving near where you are. That's going to be critical in the hours ahead, isn't it?
Indeed, yes. Actually has played already a significant role in the rescue operation. There's been tons of aid that has been sent from a lot of countries around the world. A lot of the countries, when they heard and they saw what happened here in Turkey, they swiftly responded by sending either personnel, money, equipment, or all the above. We have Sweden, for example, sent a number of aid to help people who are displaced. China has sent a rescue team here on Wednesday. Germany, Austria, the United States, Greece as well, who's now dispatching actually a second C-130 military plane and bringing another 20 more people here to help with the rescue situation. Now here, what happened, Adana actually works as a logistics center for those foreign aids. So a lot of the planes and foreign teams come here in Adana. They figure out the logistics, and then some of them are either going to stay here or go to other areas like Malatya that are affected from the earthquake. More than 25 centers have been set up here for those.
And I'm afraid, once again, we've lost Evangelo, but we will try and return to him a little later in the programme. China says it'll send $4.4 million in emergency aid to Syria. The aid will include $2 million of financial help and urgently needed equipment. Meanwhile, Beijing says it'll speed up food deliveries, working closely with Syrian authorities. China has already committed to giving $5.8 million in emergency aid to Turkey.
Well, despite the enormous rescue effort, teams on the ground are, of course, facing huge challenges. Let's talk now to Oben Çoban, who's from Turkey's branch of the charity Save the Children. Good to have you with us on the programme. So your organisation is working on the ground in affected areas of Turkey. What are they telling you?
Yeah, since the onset of the crisis early, we have been out in the field and we have been involved in the initial needs assessments. So Yeah, the calamity of the situation, the desperateness of the situation is really huge. All the drone footage we have seen, our field staff reporting out, is showing us, especially three towns, Hatay, Adıyaman, and Maraş, they were flooded out. The whole cities are simply being destroyed. I mean, no services, no electricity, no gas, no water, no internet. It's a race against that. Nighttime temperatures are below 10 degrees minus, and simply people are trying to survive in the streets without any external support, unfortunately. And especially in the rural areas, the access is one of the biggest problems. Getting to those who need support was already problematic, and we are at the third day. It's still a very big issue, and unfortunately, double with the cold and other problems, it's causing a grave concern in us.
So devastating scenes in those affected parts of Turkey. It's also affected Syria, of course, these earthquakes. Do you know what's happening there?
Yeah, I think it's a similar scene in Syria as well. I mean, we are hearing very catastrophic scenes that again seen there with thousands of people on the rubble, and due to the lack of, rescue operations, we are actually having very critical issues there as well, because rescue operations are quite inefficient at the moment. But hopefully, with more aid coming from international world, the tide has turned back. And it's not only that, but even if people survive, due to the lack of, health service provision, lack of food, water, and lack of facilities in the areas, unfortunately, even the survivors are in a grave danger of losing their lives.
Your organisation works with children, of course, and we've seen some very harrowing images of children caught up in these earthquakes. Is time running out?
Well, yeah, it's very fastly running out, but we are still hearing stories of miracles, and hopefully this can go on. But as I said, the freezing temperature coupled with lack of medical support, etc., time is really ticking out, and honestly, we are right now in a critical period, in a critical time. And even the children who have been taken out of the rubble, and they have been taken out to the hospitals, separated from their parents. This is also causing grave issues with the children, like post-traumatic stress syndrome, and even there are some reported cases of children missing, which are currently being investigated by government authorities, and we are also giving our support to find out what exactly is going on. So that's a big issue.
And you've talked about the freezing temperatures because the conditions now in the aftermath of these earthquakes are also putting people at risk, aren't they?
Yeah, they are very much putting them into danger. And normally on the, let's say, smaller size earthquake, what happens is that after the earthquake, blankets, thermals, and all other stuff are being provided, and this is aiding people. But at the moment, what we are seeing is, as majority of the scenes are not being accessed, and the focus is currently on trying to get people from the abyss. Unfortunately, those who are out in the street trying to survive freezing cold and other, lack of services, are confronting a situation, life and death situation, unfortunately. And we should also keep in mind that the roads are destroyed, the airports are not able to be used. And it's like 10 cities in a geographically like 450 kilometers widespread area. So, it's going to be much more tougher in the upcoming weeks to be able to, take hold of that. And I think it's going to have a huge impact on children as well in the coming days.
So a damaged infrastructure, making it even harder to get help to where it's needed. But aid is coming in, isn't it, from around the world? How important is that aid?
Yeah, that's very critically important, and it's flying in. But the actual issue is when the aid comes in to some other hubs like Antep or Diyarbakir, the real issue is actually getting them into the actual earthquake hit zones. As the roads are temporary, as airports are not working, this is the toughest thing. International aid coming into those main hubs, transferring them into those people, and that's not even enough. Also distributing them directly to those who are in urgent need. This is the actual problem, and at the moment what we see is this issue, no one has been able to find a solution for that. And I think the best chance we have now is getting this flow of international aid as soon as possible and as much as possible. And in the meanwhile, government organizations together with international organizations, we are trying to find ways of facilitating this process. The roads are being repaired, the airport is being repaired. Hopefully we'll be able to have a more efficient way of getting this international aid packages into the actual impacted zones. And it is actually important to see that the weather is very bad in the whole area, so it also makes distribution almost impossible. Some of the roads between Maraş-Antep area is clogged, covered with snow, and it takes like 3 times more to cross those roads. So hopefully very soon after the repair of the roads, we will be finding a way of making those transitions between hubs to impacted areas much efficient.
Okay, Oben Çoban from Turkey's branch of Save the Children. Good to talk to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, send us fighter jets. President Zelensky's blunt message on his first visit to London since the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel, and connect. How we think, interact, and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliet Mann.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Just a reminder that CGTN is available to watch for free on all the major digital platforms, on Smart TV or online on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
President Vladimir Zelensky has called for fighter jets to be sent to Ukraine to help win the fight against Russia's invasion.
In a surprise trip to London, Zelensky held talks with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak at Downing Street and is also visiting Ukrainian troops being trained in England. In a speech to MPs at Westminster, he said Russia would ultimately be defeated.
The United Kingdom is marching with us towards the most important victory of our lifetime. It will be a victory over the very idea of the war. After we win together, any aggressor, it doesn't matter, big or small, will know what awaits him if he attacks international order. Any aggressor is going to lose.
Our correspondent Andrew Wilson is in Westminster. Andrew, a strong and evocative speech from President Zelensky.
Yes, indeed, and a well-kept secret as well. It wasn't made clear he was coming at all until this morning at breakfast time, when suddenly it was clear that he was arriving in about half an hour at Stansted Airport. The Prime Minister was there to meet him. The red carpet rolled out, and the two leaders travelling back into the City of London in the back of the Prime Minister's car, discussing, no doubt, the issue of jet fighter planes, as many other issues as well. A chance for the two leaders to get to know each other, because, of course, the leader that President Zelensky first formed a bond with was Boris Johnson as Prime Minister back in February 2022. Boris Johnson was there at Parliament today. The cameras picking him up a number of times because President Zelensky picked him out to thank him for being one of the first people to step up in their support of Ukraine once the Russian forces advanced into Ukrainian territory back in February last year. President Zelensky made it clear he's here looking for help. It's part of his job as the president of his country, but Britain was chosen first, after France, which is tonight, and Brussels, which is tomorrow. Those two trips have been leaked in advance. This one was kept secret. He also invoked the spirit of Winston Churchill, saying that he sat in his chair in the war rooms and it struck him how bravery was the ingredient needed to get through the unimaginable horrors being visited on a population, but to come out with victory in the end. And victory, he said, is what we're all looking for together.
Andrew, words are one thing, it's weapons he really wants. The President wants fighter planes. Is Britain or anyone else in a position to offer them?
Well, they are in a position to offer them, and there has been some chat since his speech in Parliament today, particularly focusing around former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who said that he thinks we ought to be offering jets to Ukraine. He said we've got 100 Challenger tanks, we've got 100 Typhoon fighter jets, we should be able to spare some of both of those. Tanks were the issue a month ago. This time round it's fighter jets. Thus far, the Americans particularly are not keen, but nor are the leaders in Brussels as well. They feel it would push the whole situation a little too far and accelerate the conflict into something perhaps a little wider and a little different. So there is reluctance on all parts. However, I have to say that the standing audience today in the Palace of Westminster was very receptive to President Zelensky's talk of fighter jets. He presented the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyles, with a fighter pilot's helmet with the inscription on it saying, "We have freedom, give us the wings to protect it." A clear signal that he's unashamedly asking for those fighter jets to be supplied by somebody as quickly as possible.
Combat aircrafts for Ukraine, wings for freedom. 2 years ago, I thanked you for delicious English tea. And I will be leaving the Parliament today thanking all of you in advance for powerful English planes.
Andrew, President Zelensky called for more effort to cut off the funding for Russia and prosecute those backing Moscow's war effort.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I have to say he's good at this, President Zelensky. He's charming, he speaks well, he wins over an audience very easily, and he certainly did that today in London. He talked about a coalition of values. He put Ukraine very much in with all the other countries in Western Europe and the challenges that they face. He said that there's a new reality of the free world. He talked about evil still being around today and that the battle continues. He was very clear that Ukraine's fight is everyone's fight, and that they should be joined. And this is his job as president of Ukraine. He has two sides to what he has to do. One is to cajole and support his people who are sending off their young men and their young women, as he pointed out in his speech today, to fight and perhaps lose their lives on the front line, and at the same time maintain the level of support internationally that is so crucial for this war to continue to be prosecuted on Ukraine's part. They simply cannot do it without the support and the hardware and the antagonism towards Russia that the West will and is currently seeming to be willing to provide. And if that slips, then the game changes very swiftly indeed. And that was the purpose of his mission here in the UK, just like Winston Churchill in 1941, wearing his battle fatigues, his dark blue overalls, and he addressed Congress to try and persuade them to take President Roosevelt's lead and support Britain in its war against Nazi Germany.
Andrew, thank you. Our correspondent Andrew Wilson in Westminster.
This visit by President Zelensky comes as fighting in eastern Ukraine continues to intensify, with both sides claiming to have inflicted heavy losses in recent days. Kyiv continues to warn that Russia is bringing in tens of thousands of newly mobilized troops for a huge offensive, marking the first anniversary of its invasion. Ukraine's national security chief says Moscow is planning to recapture lost ground in Kharkiv and Zaporizhia. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Will Denslow, who's in Kyiv. So, Will, Kyiv continuing to warn of an escalation in the east of Ukraine, but that's already started, hasn't it?
Well, certainly there were a number of air alerts across much of the country this afternoon, including very, very briefly here in Kyiv. When it comes to the fighting on the grounds in the front lines in the east of the country, well, incredibly attritional battles being fought. We've heard from British intelligence this week saying that Russian forces are progressing about a couple of hundred meters per week. They say their progress slowed substantially due to lack of munitions, as well as personnel lacking some experience too. And of course, this all comes amid reports that Russia is massing tens of thousands of troops ahead of this potential spring offensive. Now, we have heard in the past 24 hours from President Zelensky addressing the public in his address on Tuesday, saying that they were monitoring Russia's movement and developments with regards to this potential offensive. Zelensky saying that he is doing all he can to make sure that the troops on the front lines are fully prepared to stave off any kind of offensive. And of course, this trip to the UK and to Europe more widely very much plays into that.
So how is this trip from President Zelensky to the UK being reported in Ukraine?
Well, of course, there have been plenty of addresses over the past year from Volodymyr Zelensky, mostly online, of course, appealing to parliaments, lawmakers around the world for more supplies, for more weaponry. The hope is that this personal touch can have the desired effect. Of course, after the trip to Washington in recent weeks, we saw some movement when it came to the US and, of course, Europe agreeing to send those Leopard 2 tanks. So now the focus is on those F-16 fighter jets. So there'll be a real hope here in Kyiv that these messages, these shows of these signs of support in London and then later in the week in Brussels and Paris later today will be met with deeds as well as those strong words too. But of course, there is a question of not just if these weapons can be sent to Ukraine, but also when. The message from plenty here in Ukraine is this real feeling that unless weapons are here soon, that will make it very difficult for Ukraine to not only potentially stave off Russian advances, but also would make it very difficult to launch any kind of counter-offensives as well.
Will, thank you very much. Our correspondent, Will Denslow in Kyiv.
Moscow has accused the European Union of failing to deliver on promises made as part of a deal to unblock grain exports from Ukraine. President Putin has vowed to revise the terms of the deal, which was brokered last year by the United Nations and Turkey. Meanwhile, the country's Deputy Prime Minister says Russia will announce countermeasures to the EU's recently announced price cap on Russian oil products by March.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. US President Biden calls for competition, not conflict, with China as he delivers the annual State of the Union address.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London. China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference. Facing the unknown is always difficult. In a world in turmoil, it's easy to lose orientation. But when the storms come, we have to see the possibilities. Reinvent. Find new opportunities. Discover a path forward. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story. Wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Plea to British lawmakers from Ukraine's President Zelensky, send us fighter jets.
Our other headlines, the death toll from the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria hits more than 11,000 people, with the United Nations warning that figure could reach 20,000.
And the international community mobilises search and rescue teams from across the world, but time is running out to try and save the victims.
Well, CGTN's correspondent Trent Murray is in Turkey's eastern city of Malatya. Trent, what are you seeing where you are?
Well, I suppose the first thing really to notice, Jamie, is that the sun is well and truly down now. Those temperatures are dropping. The conditions very, very tough, but it is not slowing down the efforts of those search and rescue crews here. Let me just step out of frame slightly so you can see what's happening. This is this 8-storey apartment building which we've been reporting on. We know that around 80 residents were living in there when the earthquake hit in the early hours of Monday morning. Sadly, 50 of them roughly have already been pulled out dead, according to authorities. But for the other 30 that may still be in there, potentially alive, some of them, well, that is why you are seeing that all-hands-on-deck effort from the military, police, local mine workers and yeah, just volunteers as well, all piling in to do what they can to try and help with the effort. But it is, of course, a very tough set of conditions. We've just seen the rescue commander here calling out, screaming out for more diesel fuel to be brought in to keep the generators going so the spotlights can stay on. It's those types of things that the community is pitching in for, helping with, and that is why I think we are probably going to see this scene all throughout the night, even though that window of survivability is starting to close now, given the earthquake occurred almost 72 hours ago. People here are just not giving up hope.
Trent, what sort of challenges are those rescuers facing?
Well, the main challenge right now, I think, is just an understanding that they are up against the clock, but it is also those frigidly cold temperatures. We're seeing actually some almost makeshift impromptu fires being built around this rescue site using pieces of timber and other rubble to keep them burning. Those are being used so rescuers can take a bit of a break, come and keep warm and re-warm themselves to go back and then jump onto that mountain of rubble. The other issue, of course, is just the vast humanitarian needs of this city. I mean, Malatya is a fairly well-established city in Turkey. It's a pretty big economic centre, but it has been hit hard. And when you speak to people here, they will tell you that either their home has been destroyed in the earthquake, it's been damaged in the earthquake perhaps, or that they just don't want to go home right now because they're still nervous and worried about those violent aftershocks that we are seeing. So more and more local facilities are opening up to provide them emergency accommodation. Universities, football stadiums and the like. People are able to go there to get a blanket, to get a heater, to get a hot meal. I think that seems to be where the focus is, at least where I am right now, just to try and help these people get through the next couple of days with the basic necessities of life and then worry about the medium and long-term rebuilding or rehousing. Right now it is just still a search and rescue operation and also very much a humanitarian operation.
Trent, when you hear these numbers of 11,000 people losing their lives or maybe even 20,000 people, it's difficult to get a handle on the scale of this tragedy, but you've been there a good time now. What is it that struck you, in terms of what you've seen?
Well, I mean, right now what you are seeing, of course, is you see those big numbers nationally, but then when you bring it down to a local level, you start to feel the impact. I was speaking to a gentleman just an hour or so ago who was telling me that his 91-year-old great-aunt lived in that building. He has been here for 3 days waiting for news. He obviously knows the odds are against him and his family, given her age and given the severity of the collapse, but he's not giving up hope. We also saw, just before we came on air, there was a brief moment of excitement because we could see some crews bringing a stretcher with somebody on it, and so everybody ran towards the ambulance. They had come from the rubble. They thought it may have been somebody that had been pulled out alive, and then a very firm ambulance officer had to come out the back to say to everyone, look, you need to back away, the person is dead. And those are the types of stories that you see when you have a humanitarian disaster like this. As you say, it's very easy to look at the numbers and to be a bit overwhelmed by it, but when you're seeing it at a ground level, knowing that these are people's relatives and friends, seeing people crying and emotional, hanging for some sort of positive news, then it really does hit home. And that is, once again, Jamie, I'm just going to be quiet now because the rescue commander has called for quiet, because they may have heard a voice or a whisper inside of that rubble and they want to listen. So all the heavy machinery now has been switched off. The site has been told to be silent. They will listen.
Trent, we're going to
listening.
Leave you in...
And that is the... Sorry, Jamie, I'll just come back. We just got the message. It was a false alarm, unfortunately.
Trent, thank you for that. We'll come back to you during the coming hours on CGTN, but for the moment, our correspondent, Trent Murray, in Malatya. Well, Christian Lindmeier is from the World Health Organization. He told me that the damage to key supply routes into Syria is making it much harder to get aid to where it's needed there.
Well, we have to separate here. We have two really different country setups. We have, of course, Turkey, which is as badly hit, but of course, Turkey as a country has a lot of capacity themselves. So here, our teams from WHO, or actually all the health teams that WHO is coordinating, are supporting the government in their efforts. We have emergency medical teams arriving, and that can help with the clinical side of it. We had other partners who do the search and rescue, and it's a horrible picture of trauma wounds, of shock wounds, and of course mainly of the people still under the rubble. And it's a run against the time right now. The important thing here is that also those who have just survived and are out of their buildings because of all the hundreds of aftershocks, they are actually out in the cold, in the winter and snow. They need tents, they need help, they need warm clothes, they need water first of all, and all that together is a horrific mix of need. a very different picture in Syria, where the needs are the same, but of course we have a population of about 15 million who has been fleeing the war already. We have a way less capable country to deal with this. So here we need all the same things, but we need access. We need to get there. We need to reach the people, and we need to find out how many people are actually affected.
I'm guessing this is going to be the story of two countries, isn't it? In a sense, your chances of rescue are going to be higher in Turkey than they are in Syria.
Absolutely. This is exactly the picture. Let's not forget all the help which northwestern Syria area has been getting the last years has been mainly coming out from Gaziantep, which is now heavily affected itself. So you have a country which is depending, or people, millions of people depending on humanitarian aid since years, and they are now struck with a disaster on top of it. So it's an emergency inside an emergency, and with a way less prepared country with way less resources. The international community, all the UN, all the NGOs, everybody's standing by, ready to help. But you need access, you need to get there, you need the logistical means to get there, and you need also local staff to help you. But all the local staff is affected themselves by the earthquake and all the aftermath. So it's an emergency inside an emergency.
The inference of your words are that at the moment you can't get access to Syria. Is that true?
Actually, that's not entirely true, and I'm glad you're asking. We actually reached already 16 hospitals to supply, because we do have a country office in Syria, which is placed in the Damascus, and they are also negotiating on a daily basis with the authorities for access. Until recently, apparently, there was only one border crossing towards Turkey open, but now apparently there seem to be 3 border crossings open again. So a lot of work of the UN agencies is to negotiate the free access of material, the unhindered move of all the help and all the goods that need to reach the people. So that is happening, but it's a daily redo of all the efforts and of all the paperwork also in order to get help to the people. No, it's not impossible. It is happening, but we need much more.
Now, it's one of the big set speeches of the political year. And in it, US President Joe Biden said he wants competition with China, not conflict. In his first State of the Union speech since the House of Representatives came under Republican control, Biden also pledged to work with opposition lawmakers for the good of the country. However, some Republicans jeered him. The speech serves as a blueprint for Biden's 2024 re-election campaign. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, John Terrett in New York. So, John, break it down for us. What were Joe Biden's key points?
Hey, Robin. Hey, Jamie. Well, you know, something happened last night that was new, that we haven't seen before, or certainly on this scale. It was much more like the House of Commons when the Prime Minister comes to the cockpit of the Commons in London and takes part in Prime Minister's questions, and there's lots of shouting and jeering and chai-acking going on. Well, that's how it was last night. The President raised several issues, including immigration and Medicare and Social Security, and the Republicans in the chamber pushed back hard against him. And then guess what? He pushed back at them. He came back with some pretty good one-liners. Now, I'm told this morning that the White House is very, very happy about this because, as you said, it was indeed a soft launch for the Democrats' election campaign for the presidency in 2024. The White House was not expecting what it saw last night, I'm told, but it was pretty happy the way things worked out. Now, President Biden hasn't said he will definitely run in 2024, although I have to tell you it's assumed that he will, and the announcement will come in the next couple of weeks. But certainly this was an outline of what we can expect when we get to the presidential election. Campaigning for that has already begun here in the United States. His focus was on the bright spots of the economy, so that's the unemployment rate down to 3.4%, the lowest in 15 years, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that he passed last year to pay for new bridges and roads and ports and internet, that sort of stuff. He did mention China, but only very briefly, as I told you he would yesterday. He referred to China on a sovereignty issue and then moved on. He urged the Republicans to find common ground with the Democrats to move forward. At one point, that did, in fact, get a chamber-wide standing ovation. And time again, his mantra was, let's finish the job, let's get things done, make it happen, do it, that kind of talk. As for the Republican pushback, which came from Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is the new governor of the state of Arkansas in the south of the country, her message was very blunt. Biden is too old to run again in 2024. She said, I'm for freedom. He's for government control. Robin?
And on that, some figures out suggesting that trade between the United States and China is booming.
I know, this is extraordinary. Despite everything that we've been reporting on this program in the course of the last year, it turns out trade between the US and China hit a record in 2022. According to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, who monitor these things the whole time, and it's very difficult to get a handle on this kind of stuff unless you're doing it on a daily basis, which they are. According to them, bilateral trade, that's trade between both countries going back and forth, reached $690.6 billion in 2022, a record. US exports up $2.4 billion, Chinese exports up $31.8 billion, and all of this with tariffs, of course, still in place. What is the lesson? Well, don't believe everything you hear on the radio.
And, John, we also heard from Fed Chairman Powell, but the markets ignored him.
Well, Chairman Powell was speaking yesterday, Tuesday, at the Economic Club in Washington, D.C. Very important speech because last Friday, the economy, it was revealed, had created 517,000 new jobs in the month of January, and that basically means almost certainly the Federal Reserve will go on raising interest rates for longer and far higher than Wall Street would like. Powell saying quite clearly there's more work to do, and it'll probably take quite a bit of time to bring inflation down from its present 40-year high. The markets fell very heavily and sharply on this news, but then completely got over themselves, and it totally recovered. And in the end, the Dow was up 1%, the Nasdaq 2%, and the S&P 500 1% yesterday. Now, they're all down by pretty much that amount now, but the bottom line is Wall Street simply does not believe that a recession is inevitable. Robin and Jamie?
John, thanks very much for that. Our correspondent John Terrett in New York.
eBay and Zoom have become the latest tech firms to announce redundancies. eBay said it would shed 4% of its global workforce, while Zoom announced about 1,300 job losses. Rapid interest rate hikes and weak consumer demand have led to similar cutbacks across corporate America.
Shipping giant Maersk has warned its profits could be hit by falling demand and lower costs. The company forecast it would make between $8 and $11 billion this year, down from the record $36.8 billion last year. The drop in demand follows a boom in the container shipping business during the pandemic.
The French oil giant TotalEnergies made record profits of more than $36 billion last year. That's double the previous year's earnings and comes after soaring energy prices since the start of the invasion of Ukraine. Rival companies BP, Shell and ExxonMobil have also posted record annual profits.
The UK's FTSE 100 has hit another record high, beating an earlier record set last Friday. The rally comes after the US Federal Reserve Chairman suggested inflation could ease significantly later in the year. Traders are also positive after predictions that the UK could avoid a recession.
The ratings agency Fitch has revised its economic outlook for China this year, upgrading its growth forecast from 4.1% to 5%. The agency is predicting consumer and broader activity recovering faster than initially anticipated as economic activity resumes after COVID lockdowns and restrictions.
China's car sales plunged 38% in January. That's as businesses shut down for an early Lunar New Year holiday, and tax cuts on vehicle purchases and electric car subsidies came to an end. Sales of new energy cars, including pure battery EVs and plug-in hybrids, also fell 6.3% in January.
You're watching CGTN, still ahead. Starting local but thinking global. How people power is rewilding the Scottish Highlands.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. people make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
The economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. The European Union has unveiled new plans to boost green industries in a bid to reach net zero.
But critics say the plan is too vague and that not enough emphasis has been put on reducing energy consumption. Our correspondent Alex Cadier reports.
Europe's green revolution is accelerating. New plans unveiled by the European Commission aim to boost the bloc's green industries and speed up the transition to climate neutrality. The Green Deal industrial plan, announced on the 1st of February, is designed to counter the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act, which offers tax breaks and subsidies to North American businesses producing clean and green products like renewable energy parts and electric cars. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said she's happy to see other countries taking action.
We have since long argued that the fight against climate change is a must for our planet, a must for our economic prosperity, and a must for our strategic independence.
This new plan promises to simplify the rules around green technology and accelerate access to funding by loosening state aid restrictions for member states. That, it's hoped, will boost public investment in green technology. While many welcome the plan, critics say it remains vague when it comes to specifying which technologies will be eligible for support. Nuclear power, for example, would be a divisive issue were it to be included. According to climate NGOs, the plan also falls short on secondary climate priorities. They say the focus should also be on reducing energy consumption and focusing on things like energy efficiency and insulation. Nevertheless, the plan has been welcomed by European renewable companies.
Announcing this kind of plan is the good thing. It shows the EU is setting the direction. We have to promote the energy transition and accelerate the development of renewable energy across the bloc. This is particularly important because member states haven't perfected their own strategies.
What's certain is that the EU has woken up to the risk of massive green investment from other countries and the risk of European industry moving away to more competitive markets. The plan also marks a strategic shift on where the EU will source the raw materials used to make green technologies. While the bloc currently gets the overwhelming majority of its rare earth materials from China, the Commission is eager to diversify its supply of sources and strike deals with other countries like Australia. The Green Deal industrial plan is part of a range of policies set out by the EU to stay competitive as it transitions towards net zero. But this is about more than just a single policy. Experts say it is the start of a massive transformation of Europe's economies and societies towards being greener for good. Alex Cadier, CGTN, Belgium.
The daughter of DPRK leader Kim Jong-un has made a rare public appearance at an event to mark the 75th anniversary of the army. Kim Ju-ai, who's believed to be 9 or 10, accompanied her father as he met senior officials and praised the military's strength. Pyongyang is thought to be planning a military parade in the capital to showcase its latest hardware.
Australia has refused to grant permission for an open-cast coal mine near the Great Barrier Reef. The government said the proposed mine, 10 kilometres from the reef, risks causing irreversible damage. This is the first time the federal government has used environmental laws to block the development of a coal mine.
A small community in Scotland has raised millions of dollars to create its own nature reserve.
Near the former textile town of Langham, the project will focus on restoring the natural environment and tackling climate change. Our correspondent Emma Keeling reports.
Biodiversity. It underpins global food security, health and clean water. It's also essential for mitigating climate change. All over the world, local groups and communities are no longer waiting for government, UN or corporate action. They are taking action themselves. In the southern uplands of Scotland, the Langham community is one such community. They've created the Terrace Valley Nature Reserve.
So at the beginning, this was what, an impossible dream?
It was, it absolutely was. So the land came up for sale in the end of 2019, and then the community embarked on a huge fundraising campaign that went international. So they had 6 months to raise £3.8 million to bring this land here, 5,200 acres of Langham Moor and the Terrace Valley, into community ownership. With help from thousands of people around the world, we did it. We made it happen.
And they've just finished another mammoth effort, raising £2.2 million to buy 5,300 acres to double the size of the reserve. The UK is one of the most ecologically depleted areas in the world. Only half its natural biodiversity remains. The charity Rewilding Britain is hoping to reverse that damage by encouraging communities to allow nature to flourish. Terrace Valley is now part of that network.
So you've got the land. What's the plan? What are you trying to achieve?
So I think the headline is that we're managing this land to create a diverse nature reserve. And there's sort of 4 pillars to what we're trying to do. So number 1 is obviously it's nature's restoration, and then number 2 is that we are making a verifiable contribution to the climate emergency through restoration of forest and peatland. And then number 3, I probably should have said this to number 1, but that people are really at the heart of what we're doing. And the reason why the community bought this land is so that it is an asset for community regeneration, so that the young people growing up in Langham and in the area see the benefits of us owning this land.
The idea that started out trying to save the town became a project to save the environment that would benefit all.
So we've got a very sort of rich, diverse habitat, but there is obviously a lot of habitats that are lost and missing, and which we're going to be working really hard to restore.
Jenny is showing me another treasured part of the reserve, peatlands, which are a type of wetland. They don't look like much, but they have global importance for biodiversity and also as a carbon sink. Peatlands are found in 180 countries, cover 3% of the world's land area and store at least 550 gigatons of carbon, more than twice the carbon stored in all the world's forests.
This would have been a very boggy, wet kind of habitat, and then that's the ideal conditions for the peat to keep developing over like thousands of years.
For decades, dried peat has been used as a fuel or fertiliser.
How big are the peat areas that you have on the reserve?
Over 1,000 hectares of peat. It's a lot, and a lot of that is deep peat, so that's like a deep carbon store. But a lot of them are in a degraded state, so they are giving off more emissions at the moment than they are sequestering.
People say we must save the planet. In fact, the planet will be just fine without us. The Langham story is a metaphor for environmental action worldwide. When we save our environment, we save ourselves.
Emma Keeling ending that report.
The headlines again. The death toll from the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria hits more than 11,000 people, with the United Nations warning that figure could reach 20,000.
The international community mobilises search and rescue teams from across the world. The time is running out to try and save the victims.
And the plea to British lawmakers from Ukraine's President Zelensky: send fighter jets.
That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
More on all of our stories at europe.cgtn.com, and do follow CGTN Europe on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.
We're on smart TV apps, Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire and Android TV, YouTube, Dailymotion, CGTN.com and the CGTN app, and in the UK on Freeview.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow. Same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.